this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Back and to the left. Back and to the left. Back and to the left. For many of us, we have heard those words for years now. They first came into, I guess, our lexicon when Oliver Stone's movie JFK premiered several decades ago now. But you know, those words did not come from the pen of Oliver Stone, though Kevin Costner was uttering them as Jim Garrison on film. That's not their point of origin either. They originated from the mind of one of the giants of forensic science. Today, we're going to talk about the remarkable life of Cyril Wecht. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, back in November, obviously, you and I taped one of our most well-received episodes of this podcast, and it had to do with the assassination of our former president, John F. Kennedy. And that story had occupied a time and a place that, you know, for many of that generation is now beginning to fade. But there's something that had entered our lexicon as a result of the man that we're going to be discussing today, that will echo through time, I submit to you. And as a matter of fact, it's not only has it been, that phrase has it been dramatized from the perspective of Oliver Stone's movie, but actually it drifted over into Seinfeld. But they did an entire episode involving Newman and Kramer. Yeah, the loogie, the magic loogie.
First baseman, Keith Hernandez.
Keith Hernandez, yeah, back and to the left.
Wow.
That's kind of how ingrained that is. But, you know, we have to understand that originates from a person who occupied these great heights that very few have ever reached. Both academically, professionally, and even people might be surprised to find this out, politically. And it came from Dr. Cyril Wecht. And, you know, the reason I feel compelled to lay this down today is the fact that, unfortunately, in the past week, Dr. Wecht has passed on. And I can't believe we're having this conversation because what are the odds that within 2 weeks, 3 weeks of one another, we would lose Werner Spitz and we would lose Cyril Wecht.
Amazing.
Two giants that have gone down now.
And they were both Cyril Wecht was 93.
Yeah, he was.
And
he was.
Werner Spitz was 94.
Yeah. They both kind of occupy that space, and there's a connection between both of them and JFK
Yeah,
because,
one agreed, one didn't.
Yeah, they did, and they were on the same committee.
Goodness.
I think that Michael Bodden was on there was somebody else
Wow.
too. I can't really recall. But Cyril Wecht was the one dissenting voice out of that group of people. I think they all came to the conclusion that the president's autopsy was botched, and to say that his autopsy was botched is an insult to all things that have been botched through all of human history. Out of all of the autopsies that could have been botched, JFK's was botched by rank amateurs.
If that doesn't tell you something's wrong, okay? And I mean this in the nicest way I can. Whether you believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone and shot the president from behind from the third floor of the Texas School Book Depository as he went through Dealey Plaza, or if you believe something else, we, as the American people, deserve to know the truth, and they prevented that from happening and started breaking the law immediately. And that's a major problem for people like me. When they took the body, they being whatever powers that be, Lyndon Baines Johnson at the top, when they kidnapped the body of the president, the former president, and took him back to Washington, D.C., they broke a law.
Yes.
They broke multiple laws in what they did, and they being, again, whoever orchestrated this whole thing. And then the cover-up. The cover-up began in Dallas and ends in Washington, D.C., and all these years later, we still don't know what happened. But Cyril Wecht had the guts to stand up and say, I used to believe the Warren Commission until I looked at the facts.
Yeah, and you said guts, and you're absolutely right. Can you imagine? There's a lot of people, I think that think that they can be brave, and people throw around the term bravery a lot nowadays. I think everybody thinks that they're Audie Murphy, and they're not. I hate to inform you, you're not. Cyril Wecht is this person that stood, by many accounts, alone.
Yep.
He was that lone voice crying out in the wilderness, and he did it for years and years. Dave, this is interesting. I've actually been present. He would go and do presentations where he would bring up audience members. This is where this thing originated with Seinfeld. And I think with JFK as well, going back to the movie, where he would pull people out of the audience. They actually did this in the film, where they have the people seated behind one another, and as if they're riding in the limo, and he's got this rod that he's showing the trajectory. That's a real thing, and he still did it. He was still doing this right up till recently when he would travel around. He's done it. He did it. I think it was it last year or the year before? He did it at CrimeCon.
It would have been.
Yeah. I don't remember. Yeah. I think it may have been last year or the year before that. He was up on stage doing this. He pulled people up out of the audience, but he'd go to universities. He'd go to anywhere. And you talk about bravery. Here's the one thing. Did you know that when you go to that museum, the Book Depository Museum, the narrative in there, and you can feel it when you walk in, is lone gunman. It's lone gunman. It's Lee Harvey Oswald did this. End of story. Did you know that Dr. Wecht was the first person that was allowed to come in and speak as a featured speaker that had an opinion that differed from the lone gunman theory? He's the first person that did that in that environment. So you talk about being brave enough to walk into the lion's den. He did it. Now, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that Dr. Wecht didn't. He's a man. He had, he had faults. But I got to tell you, you talk about a remarkable life. This is not just a man that was a physician, which he was. He's also an attorney and had worked as a prosecutor in addition to his duties as a forensic pathologist.
Wait a minute. Back up.
Yeah.
He wasn't just a guy who went to school and got a law degree and then didn't practice just to make him a better investigator. He actually was a practicing attorney as a prosecutor.
Yeah. He worked for Allegheny County
in Pennsylvania,
office.
where he lived in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Allegheny County is Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And so he was part and parcel of the political landscape in Allegheny County,
I knew that.
which is Pittsburgh. Yeah. And
by the way,
he's
if
a hometown
you look
boy.
up history on Cyril Wecht, you're going to find out there were a couple of criminal trials associated with him in Allegheny County over times where he ran for office and was in office. It's when you actually look at them, though, you're not dealing with you're dealing with a lot of things that happen at a local level, politically speaking. This is a guy who was obviously brilliant. You know, you cannot get a medical degree, a law degree, and practice both without having a few marbles that are really attached on the inside. Yeah. There's just no way. But I looked at those trials. I looked at the criminal act, and I'm like, this is why good people don't get into politics.
You're right.
And look at what they did to him, if you have a moment. But when you talk about guts, Joe, you're talking about the Warren Commission, which was all the government, Chief Justice Earl Warren.
Yeah.
And by the way, just so you know, just for fun, the only unelected president of the United States of America, a congressman from Michigan, who his best claim to fame was a former football player who probably got hit on the head one too many times when he had a leather helmet on. Yeah. Gerald R. Ford was also on the committee. So you've got the Warren Commission that came up with the magic bullet theory and everything else you read in that I say garbage. But there are those who actually believe it. And I'm thinking, these are the same people that believe a lot of things that I don't believe. And I'm going to leave it at that because this is not a political discussion.
There's one player you left out of all of this.
Yeah,
and that is the former head of the CIA. Yeah. Alan Dulles, and he was part of it as well. And so when you're talking about, we said guts, let's transition to the term intestinal fortitude at this point in time, because it's not like Dr. Wecht. And here's one more accolade that people might not know: Dr. Wecht was also a serving officer in the Air Force. He was a physician in the Air Force. As a matter of fact, here in our great state of Alabama, he was stationed for his tour of duty at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery. And so he had, going in, Dr. Wecht had an understanding of the guts of the government and how things operate bureaucratically. He would have had an awareness of all of this, but still, in the face of all of that, he soldiered on. And this is the thing about it is that Cyril Wecht was not, as many out there are. He wasn't just I had a physician I used to work with. He would use this term, a professional test taker. And that's people that just go and grab degrees just so that they can stack them.
Right.
Dr. Wecht was a person of such remarkable intellect that he actually could go in and take all of these tools that he was armed with and break things down and analyze them and come to his own. He didn't have to rely on counsel. Is really, right. And I don't mean counsel like in the sense of an attorney, because he was an attorney, but he could look at things from the perspective of jurisprudence. He could look at it from the perspective of a forensic pathology dynamic, and kind of blending all of that together. And I think when you, this is what it comes down to, and you talked about these local charges and all that sort of thing. Yeah. Can you imagine being some local yokel that's running for an office, and the best you've ever been able to do is eke out some degree from some nowhere place?
Right.
You're literally so unsophisticated, right. And then you're going up against a brain like this. I think a lot of it comes down to just pure jealousy.
I did not realize he was that accomplished academically.
Yeah, and he had.
I just didn't.
And here's the thing about it. This is the amazing thing. You want to get off into the weeds academically with him. He went to Pitt as an undergraduate, which makes sense. He's a hometown boy. Did his undergraduate at Pitt, then did his medical school at Pitt, which, by the way, they have a renowned medical school. He goes into the Air Force. He's temporarily, I might get this wrong, but let me see if I can get this straight. He's working as a pathologist, I think, in the Air Force in Maryland, goes to the University of Maryland, acquires a law degree, musters out of the Air Force, comes back to Pittsburgh, gets another law degree at Pitt. and all the while he's run for the office of what was then coroner in Pittsburgh and is elected to that office and begins to blend all of this together. I can't even imagine, when he was at the prime of his life, when he was a young man, can you imagine the vigor that it requires to be able to do this? Oh, and by the way, he had arguably one of the most successful marriages at all. His wife was a Norwegian immigrant. They have 4 great children. I'm privileged to actually know his son, Ben. And of course, I knew Dr. Wecht too. I'd been invited to speak at Duquesne University, where his institute is housed. And so you look at this and you try to take the measure of somebody like this and the loss that not just the forensic community has, but he's a benchmark moment in time. And my prediction, Dave, as the decades continue to go by, at some point in time, the truth will come out in its totality about what happened to JFK, and they're standing among the rubble of all of these lies for all of these years will be Dr. Cyril Wecht, and what he had told us so many years ago, what he had predicted so many years ago, will be the truth.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
If you're in academia, one of the things you have to do as an academic is study something. The academy expects you to validate your existence in order to, indwell an institution of higher learning. You've heard the old adage about publish or perish. I certainly don't work at an institution like that, but yet you have to have an area of interest that you're going to do research in. And so by virtue of what I do as a forensics professor, one of the things that I've always been fascinated by, and one of the things that I have studied over the years, is the American coroner system. And Dave, we need to make a note of this. I think we're going to do an episode at some point in time that deals with nothing but the origin of the coroner. And that in and of itself is one of the most fascinating things, in my mind at least, that we can talk about, because I'm going to talk about things that people don't really know about.
Just so you guys know, we have a number of you have reached out over the last year or so about different things you'd like to hear or see. And this was one of those topics that came up. I heard you talking to somebody else about different coroner things, and I just didn't know. The thought that I didn't know a lot of these things really kind of boggled my mind, and I wondered how many of y'all know exactly what really goes on in this history of coroners. And right before the show, when we were talking about Cyril Wecht and Werner Spitz, I was talking to Joe about something, because there are some areas that, a coroner doesn't have to have a medical degree. A coroner doesn't have to have any, he can just run for election. And that just kind of scares me. I'm thinking, but what if, what if I was poisoned by a neighbor and this guy works as a mechanic? Not that he's not a good guy, but really, he's going to have to go get the grease off his hands to figure out how I died. How is this going to happen? But anyway,
well, with Dr. Wecht, Dave, he understood that premise. And look, there are many fine coroners out there, and a lot of them I consider dear friends. And you work within the system that you're in. But one of the things he experienced, I think, in Pittsburgh, because let's face it, he was in Pittsburgh. Well, he's been there. He was there his entire life. He appreciated the need to be an independent voice of forensics.
Wow.
And in a position that might not necessarily be an elected position, but yet it is a position that stands alone in its examination of medical legal issues. Dave, he spearheaded the transition from a coroner's office in Allegheny County to a medical examiner's office. That is a huge leap. And the one thing that, and I'd love to discuss this with you, because one of the things I think that Dr. Wecht understood is that he did not want to be tethered to any branch of law enforcement or any prosecutor's office. He wanted it to be not dependent upon election. He wanted it to be dependent upon the science, and that you cannot influence a medical examiner the way, say, for instance, a coroner might be influenced by the political tides. And there are many coroners out there that fight this fight all along. They're elected, and you can come after them, with, threatening to get them out of office and this sort of thing. But as a medical examiner, he kind of extricated the medical legal community up there from being bound, I think, being bound by this attachment to law enforcement. There's a term, and many of us really resent it. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, Dave, but there's a term, and it's a derogatory, pejorative term as it applies to medical examiners' offices and coroners' offices. It's actually called a cop shop. Now, many people have not heard this before, but this is a reality. So if an outsider comes into a medical legal environment and it's very pro-police, like, that everything that the police do is pure as the driven snow, that all objectivity has flown out of the window, that, we can go to the coroner and wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We can kind of influence what they do. That kind of sets the parameters for what a cop shop is. And it's something that I think, as a forensic scientist, you should flee from. And there's a lot of examples, positive examples out there of medical legal agencies that have completely extricated themselves from systems like that. Number one, if you want to check out a perfect template for this, go to New Mexico, because in the state of New Mexico, they have a state medical examiner, and guess who controls it? It's the state health department.
Oh, wow.
So they're not beholden to law. They get along with law enforcement. I'm not saying that, but they make these judgments independent of everybody else. And so, again, here we have Dr. Wecht, that is this brave soul that's kind of, he sallies forth into these unknown waters where every inclination that he may have been used to hearing over the years, he would go contrary to that, and he would follow his own voice within. And this brilliant brain that he had, these things that he could examine from his own perspective. I'm sure that he might ask your opinion about it. I'm sure he was willing to do that in many occasions. But don't you love the term when people say they keep their own counsel,
Yep.
Dave?
I do. It just means that they're wise enough to know they don't have to share anything. And if they do, it means something. That's how I've always looked at that, And now that I know a little more about Cyril Wecht, I understand that.
Yeah. I still can't. What amazes me is that he was an elected coroner.
Yeah.
And also he ran for county post as well. It's like county commissioner and these
county
sorts of
commissioner,
things.
1979.
Which is not, these are not waters I would personally choose to swim in,
Right.
But I think that when you have this brilliant soul that he was, you constantly have to be intellectually stimulated, or you get bored. And there's one very kind of famous quote about Dr. Wecht, and it's like his, and this is not absolute, but it's kind of paraphrased. His life was his hobby. He didn't go out and play golf. Okay, so these things that he engaged in, the study of various things, and he was fantastic at esoteric topics, like history and these sorts of things. He was well versed and well read. He's one of these people. He was kind of this modern philosopher, and that's why, when I had the opportunity to actually, and I'm so privileged to be able to look back, Dave, I got to tell you, man, I got invited to Duquesne University, where Dr. Wecht's Institute is housed, and they have an annual conference there, where they bring you in and you talk about various topics in forensic science. And he's done them on a variety of things over the years, but I was actually able to be on a panel with Dr. Wecht, where he was seated. He was 2 persons away from me, and I found myself at one point in time. And as you can tell, as people who know me, I'm rather verbose. I found myself not saying anything. I was leaning over the table, looking back to my right. The mic is right by my lips like this, and I'm thinking, and I'm just looking down the table, and I'm thinking, oh my God, Cyril Wecht is sitting right there, and I'm on a panel, and people are asking us all questions. I'm thinking, they're going to find out I'm a fraud.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to be outed right now. That's it. Yeah,
this is happening. Oh. It's going to be in this group of esteemed people, and he's sitting there and holding forth on the topic that was at hand, and it had to do with forensics and the media, which in and of itself was fascinating, because Dr. Wecht he's rendered very controversial opinion about Jean Bonnet, which
well, wait a minute.
Yeah,
what did he do? What did he say about her? And the reason I'm asking, because
yes.
we did Werner Spitz last week, and he also had something very controversial about Jean Bonnet and that case.
Yeah, well, I'll try to, let me see, how can I handle this delicately? Dr. Wecht, this is not Joseph Scott Morgan.
Yes. Okay.
Dr. Wecht held an opinion,
right,
that Jean Bonnet's father had brought about her end.
Okay.
And that it was probably accidental. And I don't know that I necessarily share that belief, but the fact that, again, that goes to him inserting himself into this. He's asked about it, and then he answers it. And, of course, we all know what happened with Dr. Spitz, in this particular circumstance.
He got sued, by the way. In case you're not familiar, go back and listen to our show that aired, hit last week.
Yeah, last week.
And where we actually broke that down. But let me go a little bit further. I got to ask you a question about a couple of things. Can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I'll shut my mouth.
No, we talked about JFK earlier and Cyril Wecht, but we never actually got down to we knew that he was kind of the lone voice in the wilderness saying he did not agree with the Warren Commission. What did Cyril Wecht actually believe happened with regard to the assassination of JFK?
He felt as though that back into the left with the Zapruder film, he felt like that was evidence of a second shooter. And I'm gonna drop a bombshell here in a moment that a lot of people have heard rumored over the years. They didn't really know about it or what the source of it was. But I will tell you that he felt so strongly about this, and you had mentioned earlier that it came about in the wake of him looking at things and him believing. I think initially, like as Americans, we all want to believe that what our government is telling us is the truth. that what we are, we shouldn't believe our lying eyes, you know, as it comes down to it, that we should believe what they're telling us. Dr. Wecht saw things in that he literally bore witness to that no other person had ever been allowed to see. And he came to some conclusions that in the end absolutely are the driving force why he rendered this opinion regarding JFK as a falsehood.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Dave, I've never been to France, but I have a desire to go to the Louvre because I would love to see the Mona Lisa. I think that would be really, really cool. But can you imagine if you go to the Louvre and you're standing in front of the Mona Lisa, which is behind thick glass, which, by the way, has been, attacked over the past few years by people throwing paint on it and all that nonsense. Can you imagine what it would be like to have somebody that's got a big ring of keys in their hand and they walk out to you and say, hey, we want to take you behind the wall here. We're going to pull the Mona Lisa out from its place, this perch here. We're going to actually let you see it, because what I've been told, when you walk in, it's behind thick glass. It's very dark, because they're trying to protect it. But can you imagine what that would be like? Or can you imagine going to the Sistine Chapel and they say, dude, we've got a scaffold for you here. We're going to set it up. Here's a magnifying glass. We're going to let you climb up there and look at this beautiful detail on the ceiling. Can you imagine what that would be like? Cyril Wecht was a person that, out of everybody, he was chosen and was provided access to the National Archives relative to the JFK assassination. And he's one of the first person that actually saw the color photography from the autopsy. He got to examine a lot of the documents that were there. But the curious thing that Dr. Wecht wanted to see and was told would be there, and certainly as a forensic pathologist, you can appreciate why he would want to see this item. He goes to look for it, and it ain't there. Cyril Wecht is the person that actually discovered that JFK's brain was missing. I want you just to step back just for a second and imagine that you're at this confluence in history. All right, you're here. All right. And you go into the National Archives and they tell you that the former president of the United States, who was murdered in front of hundreds of people, that we've got all of this, all of these artifacts from this. I don't know, Dave, could we say that it's one of the seminal events in American history? Would you concur with that?
In world history, yes. The assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963, is a moment in time, historically speaking, that people in the future are going to look back and say, that's when the United States government was no longer relevant.
Yeah, yeah. And to further prove your point, this man is brought into this environment. And there's a log list, it's like an evidence log list. And we got the brain right here. Yeah. It's right here. Okay. And Dr. Wecht had a very distinctive voice when he would talk, and he's very intense. When he'd look at you, as he's talking to you, you couldn't.
Where's the brain?
I know. He's like, hey, where is it?
Clara Peller, where's the beef?
Yeah, exactly. Where is the brain? How can you, the single most critical piece of evidence, mind you, because this is literally what is referred to as a kill shot. All right.
Yeah.
It ain't there. What happened to it? And when this information comes out, it's a firestorm.
Yeah.
And, if you don't believe me, I mean, again, don't believe me. Do your own research. Go out there and look. And it's a seminal moment.
That's why I say history will reflect on that. So that's the moment we became irrelevant as a government because they, lied to the American people. We are not a democracy. We are a representative republic, meaning you and I have a representative that is in Washington, D.C., in a House of Representatives that is our guy. And call your guy, and he doesn't know. And I mean that in the plural, mankind thing. Whoever is your representative, they ought to know or be able to get you the answers to these things. And when you ask questions about the assassination of the President of the United States of America and look at the 12 years after his assassination and what took place, and if every representative doesn't know the answer to what took place in our government, that tells you everything you need to know. The brain is gone.
Yeah,
who got fired, Joe? Who got fired for that?
Exactly. And, I can only imagine that, and there were other things that were absent as well. But
you destroy or get rid of evidence to cover up the crime.
And he's the one sniffing this thing out and looking at it and thinking, all along he's probably thinking, okay, we're being lied to over all of this. And interestingly enough, Arlen Specter, who headed up, he was like the legal counsel relative to the Warren Commission. He's a Pennsylvania product as well. And, for years, Wecht and he bumped, they bumped heads with one another. I think, geographic proximity, obviously, but they were such high profile and polarizing characters that isn't it interesting that both of these people, became entangled. I think that they kind of settled their differences after a while. But, when you look at, some of the cases that come to mind with Dr. Wecht, he actually, offered commentary on the death of Elvis Presley, and particularly, I think, resulting from the drugs, that Elvis was provided with, Scarsdale diet.
That was him. He did that.
He was involved with that. He did testimony at trial relative to Klaus von Bülow.
I did know that, Sonny von Bülow.
Yeah, and so the list goes on, and he even offered opinions about O.J. Simpson and also Michael Jackson. So he's got this wide range. And look, some people say, okay, he was a celebrity pathologist. I don't necessarily concur with that assessment. I think that in terrific times, you need a voice that is that's a balanced voice. I think that is a critical voice that can step into the gap and interpret these things that other people are not necessarily equipped to do with. And I think we laid the foundation talking about, at least academically. Mm-hmm. And he's not a person that sat back on his laurels and never did anything. One of the most beautiful things that he was able to create, and his living legacy is actually going to be the Cyril Wecht Institute, that exists at Duquesne, and it offers continuing education, in forensic science, and it's combined, interestingly enough, with their law school. In addition to that, and so he's this school, and one of my dear friends heads up the forensics program there, and she's a brilliant DNA scientist. And she's, I have a little bit of insight into what that dynamic was like with Dr. Wecht. And, she has gone on and on about the mind that he possessed, that you sit there and you can have these conversations with him, and he's up in age, at this point, and he's still firing on all cylinders.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it really is. And I think that it's important just for a moment. And I think that I would really like to kind of close things out by, kind of talking about some of his accomplishments, because it's certainly a fascinating life. I think that if I could, launch off this mortal coil at the end of my life, with a third of his accomplishments, it would be quite remarkable. But, just to set this in perspective, Dr. Wecht, over the course of his career, this man did over 21,000 autopsies, Dave. He consulted, get ready for this one, on over 42,000 additional post-mortem examinations, including he's traveled all over the world rendering opinions. And we're talking about things like war crimes and things like this that you and I, and I think that Dr. Wecht actually did things that many of us will never even know about, where he came in and consulted in cases that were, that came about as a result of humanitarian crises, because that's, it's kind of the heart that he had. He's written, I think, in close to 700 professional publications. He's either the editor or the co-editor of over 48 books. He's written multiple nonfiction books, and former president of American College of Legal Medicine, the Academy, and the Academy. Imagine this. He was actually president of the American Academy of Forensic Science. He'd been board certified as a pathologist, anatomically, clinically, and forensics. He's a fellow of the College of American Pathologists, American Society of Clinical Pathologists, and a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners. He wrote. He actually wrote a memoir. The Life and Deaths of Cyril Wecht, Memoirs of America's Most Controversial Forensic Pathologist. And of course, he is a major contributor to a book on the JFK assassination. And, I'm not getting a nickel for this, but I would strongly urge anybody that has an opportunity to watch Oliver Stone's produced multi-part series on the JFK assassination. I think it's probably on Prime. Mm-hmm. There's an entire episode of that dedicated to Cyril Wecht.
Oh, wow.
And it's absolutely fascinating, Dave.
Well, Cyril Wecht wrote a book, the JFK assassination dissected.
And that's the one I was referring to. Yeah, I'm sorry, the name escaped me. But
an analysis by forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht. You can get it on paper book. It's available. And again, not plugging or not shilling for anybody here, just sharing that while many of us think certain things based on whatever entertainment thing we've seen, without any background in it, without being able to pass a basic science and biology class in high school, we think we are somehow capable of commenting on what took place in the autopsy of the president. And yet, here we go. We have the opportunity to read what some of the best minds have to say about the subject matter. And I encourage you to read it before you yell out your opinion. Read what somebody who knew what they were talking about said. I think that's a good place to start. And Cyril Wecht, when you come to the JFK assassination, I believe Cyril Wecht is a great place to start. I have read his books.
Well, and look, I think there's not too much more that in my own feeble way I could ever say about Cyril Wecht. I had to take a moment to honor him on our program, because this is the passing of a giant in his field. His mark will be forever present on all of our lives. And he is somebody I think that we should, in some ways, aspire to be. And what I mean, the one characteristic that I would encourage my son even, always seek knowledge and always seek the truth. Try to find the truth in your own way. Come to terms with that. Don't be one of these people that is just going to go along with the flow and simply say, oh, well, the crowd said it, I'm going with it. That's not the type of person he was. Dr. Wecht was a one of a kind out there. So I just want to take a moment and first off, acknowledge his passing, and certainly the Wecht family, the Duquesne family, and all of his extended friends and colleagues. My deepest sympathies to them, because he is a man that has impacted so many of us in the field of forensic science. He passed away peacefully on May 13th, 2024. Here's to you, Dr. Wecht. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This February, Aldous Hodge returns as Alex Cross, your favorite detective on television, for Season 2 of the hit show Cross, premiering February 11th exclusively on Prime Video. Fresh off his capture of the infamous serial killer The Fanboy, Cross teams up with the FBI to hunt down a vigilante serial killer targeting corrupt billionaires. As the case unfolds, Cross navigates a moral crossroads where the lines between justice and vengeance are blurred. Catch Season 2 of Cross, with new episodes dropping weekly starting February 11th, only on Prime Video.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.